Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to be here at the IoT Security Foundation annual seminar, and it's also great that the Multos Consortium is now become a member of the IoT SF. We believe our messages around IoT security are well aligned, and we look forward to working more closely with the IoT SF in the months ahead of us. But today, we'd like to talk to you about our idea of how a robust and flexible operating system can be used to provide appropriate security for some IoT devices. Some of you, I know, are familiar with Multos, but I suspect that for many of you it's quite a new subject. So I'll briefly explain a bit about the technology, the consortium, and the ecosystem. So Multos is a trusted worldwide technology. More specifically, it's a highly secure, highly capable, and industry-backed smart card and now smart device operating system. Its recent use has seen it implemented in many countries and well over 850 million smart cards and some smart devices around the world. Next year we should hit the 1 billion mark, and also next year is the 20th celebration of the Multos technology. So a big year for Multos next year. And in terms of security, it's really at the top end of the smart card world in security. Multos smart cards were the first to achieve EAL7, a very high level of common criteria security certification. So it's really got a great pedigree in terms of security. It's a versatile technology. There are many applications that use Multos today. Some that you'll be most familiar with include smart payments, so EMV debit and credit cards, large government and ID card programs, and also mass transit applications with contactless ticketing and payment. And it's not proprietary, it's an open standard. That open standard is governed by an impressive consortium of Multos stakeholders. In fact, Chris from Infineon is one of those stakeholders. These are global companies. These are companies respected in their relevant IT and security-related fields, and they provide Multos products and services, hardware, software, data processing, transaction processing, personalization services to get the applications and data into the Multos chips and devices, consultancy, and also training. So overall, Multos, an impressive technology and a very well-supported ecosystem. So enough about Multos. So why is the Multos Consortium at an IoT SF event? Well, we also believe that there is a great need for an increase in the level of security for connected devices. I'm not going to talk about the hacks or the issues because there are many people here that know far more about than I do, and also we've had quite a few presenters talk about those this morning and earlier on. What we will talk about is the good security IT practice that we believe can be applied to address many of those problems. So the first thing is we believe you should secure the runtime. So many of these connected devices have some form of firmware or software which can be underprotected. There can be many problems that can happen to that firmware if it becomes infected with malware, such as the device no longer working, or in more severe cases, it could be used for malicious activities, potentially fraud. But one interesting issue that isn't always talked about, which has been a bit in this seminar, which is good, is what do you do if the patching mechanism no longer works after the device has become infected? Well, of course, that could result in expensive device replacement costs or expensive engineer on-site visits. So to address that in the smart card world, a trusted hardware chip with a secure software solution on board has been used for many years to prevent those issues to software. If you combine a trusted hardware with software and hardware countermeasures and a secure runtime environment, effectively a policing agent to separate the applications and their respective data on the platform, you can provide a very good level of protection for these connected and IoT devices. Some of you may remember in the late 1990s the attacks in the smart card industry, the SPA and DPA attacks. So these were statistical power analysis and differential power analysis attacks, very sophisticated attacks that were quite difficult to perform, but they were well documented. And these threatened to expose secret key or parts of the keys stored inside smart card products. So it sent, as you can imagine, a wave of concern through the banking industry that relied on smart cards and the smart card vendor community. And the result was that the vendors put extra hardware countermeasures, extra software countermeasures in their products, and they addressed the problem that way. And this was largely an exercise, not really in security, but more in preventing the bad PR and supporting the business revenue streams that the banks and other users would get from that technology. So I wonder if that sort of example could be learnt from and used in the new markets of connected and IoT devices to protect their businesses and their revenue in the future. This is a section of a diagram. I'll show the larger diagram later. And this shows, it highlights that using public key cryptography with unique key sets per device, you can provide a very high level of protection for, in this case, software protection for connected devices. In fact, this diagram you may recognize from another document, as it says there. We've adapted this from, or derived this from, a similar diagram in the GSMA IoT Endpoint Security Guideline document, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with. The second thing is we believe that endpoints should be given a robust, unique identity. A weak identity can lead to device duplication on the network, service disruption, and in more severe cases, ID impersonation and potentially fraud. So 2 ways to protect and ensure unique identity is to make sure each device has a robust cryptographic identity on the network, and also to make sure that a strong policy of mutual authentication is implemented for the device and the solution. As an example, for the identity protection, you could generate a unique random or unique serial number for the device, inject that into the device during the manufacturing process. That's relatively standard, and that allows it to be bound to a specific owner. And you could use public key cryptography used in IT for many years to protect nodes on networks, and you can generate a unique key pair, inject that into the device at the time of manufacture, and together with the serial number, that provides a really robust, unique identity for the device. Again, another extract from the larger diagram, here showing that the unique public keys per device gives a very good level of protection for today and most likely to remain secure for the long lifespan of IoT devices. Also securing the data, that's of course key for many applications. Not all data will require the same level of security. It depends on the application and what the data is being used for, but generally sensitive data should be encrypted at the endpoint, encrypted at the back-end system, and encrypted when in transit. So here's a thought, here's a question. Should we rely on the security provided by the communication protocol to ensure data privacy and protection when it's been transferred? Well, we don't believe so. We believe by using the cryptographic processes supported in microcontrollers, you can provide additional level of protection for that data over and above the level of protection provided by the communication protocol. So a good belt and braces approach to apply for sensitive data in certain applications. It may also be interesting to consider, and it was mentioned earlier, a simple and secure provisioning process. So many devices may be provisioned in a factory environment, in a secure factory environment, but some may benefit from and require a provisioning process that's dynamic and flexible and can allow devices to be provisioned or added to when they're out in the field. An interesting example could be a sport fitness wearable that requires a banking application loading after the user has bought this device and is using it out in the field. And of course, that requires typically a fairly secure process to download and install that banking application on that less secure device, potentially. Also, other examples could be a connected vehicle. So a connected vehicle may need an insurance telematics application loading when the user changes utility provider. There's a smart meter demo on our booth here at the event. Smart meters may need, in some countries, new configuration data and keys loading when the user changes utility provider. So there could be lots of examples where this flexibility in provisioning may be required. And to do that, you could ensure a strong cryptographic process is used, which can provide the simplicity and flexibility for that provisioning process. So one option could be to use PKI cryptography to ensure the deployment, the secure deployment of that device out in the field, and then use either a secure channel or an encrypted load packet to manage the content of deployment down to the device. If you use encrypted load packet the way Multos does, In fact, you can simplify the connections between the device and its provisioning system, and that can reduce your key management overheads of operating the service. Using PKI for provisioning doesn't just provide simplicity and security, but it also can provide flexibility. So if you know, as a provisioning system, if you know the PKI credentials of an endpoint device, you can generate an update for that device and send it to it, and it can load and action that update. If you don't know the PKI credentials of the endpoint device, you can still do that. You can request the credentials from the device, it can provide them to you as a third party, you can verify those credentials, and then you can use them to prepare the update and send that to the device. And that's quite a powerful and interesting mechanism to allow third parties that don't own the infrastructure, own the devices, to launch their services securely on those endpoint devices. And you could use a batch mechanism, so you could produce updates for devices offline without no connection to the device at all, generate those securely, and then store them so the devices can access those and update those as required and as convenient at a later date. So PKI is very flexible. And by building in that level of flexibility into an IoT or connected device solution, you can ensure that there's a level of future-proofing to the service and the solutions as they may be in use for a long time. And that can help the device owners to increase their return on investment. They can generate more revenue by renting out, if you like, part of their infrastructure for third parties to use. And it can also benefit the third parties, the service providers, who can have efficiencies in terms of reduced costs by not having to pay for and own the infrastructure to support some of their services. So some interesting business models that can be supported by using PKI in the IoT and connected device markets. Also, for many devices, it may be critical or important to consider the whole life cycle of the device. Some devices may require a functional update over time to change or enhance their capability. Some devices may require, quite likely, security updates over time, so patching mechanisms as the hacks continue to evolve over time. And it may be interesting as well to consider removing or deleting sensitive data and applications from devices when they reach their end of life. Do we really want our personal data, sensitive financial data, commercial, operational data sitting on devices when they're no longer used in infrastructure? So something to think about in terms of the whole life cycle process. Well, all those abilities were built into the Multos standard many years ago, and these are the main steps. So activation, a device is given its unique cryptographic identity. Issuance, the device is provided its initial application and data to perform the functions it's first used for. Subsequent updating as required throughout its life cycle. And then potentially deleting of any sensitive data or applications when it reaches end of life. Now that's all standard and has been used for nearly 20 years. And together they provide this root of trust, which underpins the Multos and I'm sure many other PKI architectures. So security is fine, and that's what we're talking about, but it's also important to consider cost efficiencies and how can PKI be employed for cost efficiencies. This is the full diagram that I mentioned earlier. So this shows the expanded set of functions that you may want to protect with different levels of security, and it clearly shows that asymmetric public key cryptography, unique keys per device, gives a very good level of protection. But also, it can allow you to leverage some potential cost efficiencies. Not having to exchange symmetric keys with third parties when you expand the scope of the ecosystem can reduce the overall key management overheads. Being able to generate updates for devices offline without a secure connection to the device in many cases may allow batch processing, a cost-effective batch processing of updates, and could again simplify and reduce costs for the total cost of the overall system. And being able to provide a third party with your credentials so that it can then interact with you and load information to you, if it's been authorized to do so, can simplify device management. So some interesting, less obvious cost efficiencies that could be considered when you decide the technology for connected devices. And in terms of the way you implement the chips, the technology, there are options. You could implement a secure element trust anchor as a separate coprocessor. That may be easy to add on to an existing system, but perhaps a better approach, as we heard this morning, is to consider using the Trust Anchor as a main microcontroller from the start, designed in at the beginning, and that can provide the overall protection and reduce the bill of materials. So let's now take a look at some of this good IT security practice in action. On our stand upstairs, you can see some demonstrations of Multos technology in use for IoT applications, and also on our website, on YouTube, you can access some older examples of the same thing. For this session, we wanted to show you a reduced video clip of the car access key provisioning demo, because it looks the best, basically, but it shows some nice features. So hopefully we'll show that when I click this. So this demo consists of a Multos micro SD card and mobile phone handset for containing access credentials for the car, a Multos chip inside the vehicle to verify and grant access to the vehicle, and a provisioning server to generate the access key and send that to the Multos chips. And when the user first enrolls for the application, they will then receive their application and the generated access key for that vehicle, and a fast and secure provisioning takes place over the air into the Multos chip in the micro SD card in the mobile handset. And to explain what happened behind the scenes, the public key certificate from the micro SD card gets sent to the provisioning server. That's verified and validated. The public key then gets used to encrypt the vehicle access key, ensuring that only the target device, the target micro SD card in that handset, can decrypt and use that access key. And once the user has the application and the access key, they can then open and close the door and get access to the vehicle. And our marketing couldn't afford a real Range Rover, so we had to resort to using a toy, which is a bit of a shame, but there you go. And the last bit just after this shows what happens in terms of the authenticating to access the vehicle. So a cryptogram is generated by using the access key that was provisioned earlier. The vehicle verifies that cryptogram and grants access or not, depending if the key is correct. So a simple example, and we're not by any means recommending or promoting micro SD cards as a great solution for the market. I'm pretty sure that's not the most viable solution out of the market. Okay. But what this does show is that many applications could benefit from that level of flexibility and security, and this is something that Multos has to offer. So just to wrap up, we believe that, well, we know that many companies will sacrifice security for cost or for speed to market, and we're not saying that PKI and hardware root of trust is the best solution that will suit every single IoT device. Of course, there'll be segments of the market which it's applicable to, but by considering these 7 sort of core processes and thoughts, device manufacturers, solution providers can build in an appropriate and hopefully a viable level of security to protect their assets, protect their solutions, and ultimately protect their brand longevity, which is what in business we really want to do. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your kind attention. If you have any questions, you can contact me here or at our booth, etc., or via the details on the screen. Thank you.